So, as the Apostle Paul is challenging the Gentile believers in Rome to be very careful, don't look down on Israel. Don't think you're better than they are, because you actually are like a wild olive branch grafted in to the olive tree. And the Jewish people, the Israelites, were the natural cultivated branches which were broken off, making room for you. But he just finished the idea that, if God would break off the natural branches that were cultivated in this tree because of their unbelief, he'd break you off too. He was delighted to graft you in and wants you to be grafted in. He also wants to take those branches that have been broken off and graft them back into the tree, to the olive tree. He's using the olive tree as a symbol of the covenant relationship that he has established with all mankind. And he is desiring not just the Gentiles, but also the Jews. Maybe, I think we could say, especially the Jews. And that's the Apostle Paul's perspective. I love my kinsmen, my blood relatives, those that physically descended from Abraham through Isaac and Jacob. And he says, I would give up my salvation if it meant that they would believe and be saved. So he's continuing that idea. He's going back to the Old Testament, quotes from the Psalms, from Isaiah, from Jeremiah, here in Romans 11, verses 25, 26, and 27, where we read, For I do not want you, brothers, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation, that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved, just as it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will remove ungodliness from Jacob. This is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Now, he's not saying every Jewish person, every individual is going to be saved. That's like saying every Gentile will be saved. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, I love Israel. And that hasn't changed. That's a covenant God made with Abraham before he made the covenant with Moses. He made a covenant with Abraham through Isaac, his son of promise. And Isaac was the father of Jacob, whose name was Israel also. So the whole point of this is, if you're a Gentile, do not look down on the unsaved Israelite or Israeli. Do not look down upon them with arrogance. Rather, look upon them like in Luke 15. I keep going back to that story of the prodigal son. Like the older brother should have looked at his younger brother. That's how we ought to look at those that are wasting the Father's blessings. We have to look at them with a longing that they would come home, that they would come back into the Father's household, that they would come back to the family table, that they would come back to the family business. So rather than looking around with an arrogance, wisdom, we think we're better than they are. David, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all the Old Testament prophets foretold of the love of God for not just the entire world, but I'm going to say especially for Israel. He has a place in his heart for Israel. And Israel today is like the younger brother in Luke 15, wasting the Father's inheritance. We should have the Father's attitude and long for them to come home. If your family members, if your neighbors, if your coworkers, your friends and your enemies are not Christians, you should long for them to come into the Father's home. Don't be arrogant. Don't look at other people and say, well, God loves me and he doesn't love you, because that is not true. God does love you, but he loves them too. And I love the idea that every day I get to remind you that God loves you. And because he loves you, we love you too.